Hey guys, Thomas Cecilia Jr. here, aka Mustached, here to review the movie Enchanto. If you end up enjoying this review, then please feel free to like, comment, and subscribe. Also make sure to check out those links in the description. The first will head you over to my Discord, the second will head you over to my Patreon, and just below that now, my PayPal, just in case anyone wants to support me with specific requests or anything of the like. That being any movie reviews I might have not done before, or a video game let's play, which, depending on the game, will depend on the price. So, gotta cover my bases here now. But with all that shelling out of the way, I'll remind you at the end of the review of all those things you can do that will help support me. Alrighty, with all that out of the way, let's talk about Disney's Enchanto. So, obviously I'm a little bit late on this review, considering that I think this came out early last month-ish area. But that is the price I pay for doing other reviews, more Patreon-supported ones, on top of being more in-depth with my reviews, which is always, I feel, necessary. For me and for people who watch me. I want to make sure my content covers it all. So let's go over the plot and all that stuff. So, this movie follows a young woman named Maribel. I'll just call her Mary for short. On one of her early birthdays, she starts asking about these questions. She's provided this little candle that potentially provides her family with powers. And as we are learning and seeing this visual storytelling take place, we also see that the grandma of the family tells a story about how she fled from wherever she was from, and how they ended up where they are now. Obviously, some old school takeover stuff happened. Anyway, we have a time skip where after we see our main character not possessed with any powers, or at least that is the indication. So, she sings her first song, and it's very clear that this movie has a very Hispanic flow to the music that was very recognizable with the beats and even the movement of the dancing. So it is nice to see some different cultures, and hell, for Disney to actually do something original. I should cover that base first. It's nice to not see a remake or another reboot or a sequel or something of that nature. It's nice to actually see Disney cover something that's, from as far as I can tell, as original as, it's independent from every other thing Disney. Let's keep it simplistic. And I kept thinking about Coco, because that was the other movie that had very, or more Mexican heritage involved. So, I will say now that I would say out of the two movies, I definitely enjoyed Coco a lot more. So that should tell you a lot about how I feel on a subjective manner of the two movies, and hell, I would even argue on an objective level Coco is a better movie, but I think this movie is fine. But we'll talk more about that as we continue through the plot. So, as she's singing more about her family and what they can do, the kids that are following her around are more obsessed with what she can do. They wanna learn, because they're very nuisance-heavy kids, and they learn pretty quickly that, of course, she has no powers, as I mentioned. So her father talks to her briefly after the fact. And the grandma tells her to essentially step aside so that the rest of her family with powers can put on this display so that, the people in the town will be blessed with this miracle, as they keep referring to it as. And as she steps aside, she goes to this room with a younger sibling, the youngest, I believe, of the family. And he is next in line to get this whole ordeal and power and all that stuff. So, we see the grandma show her this candle that is indicated to give powers and to her family, and provides a little speech. And after the fact, the youngest sibling gets called forth, gets an animal color power, essentially. And when Mary sees this, she sings about how she's how trying not to be sad about, being the one who is skipped, essentially. And this is where the movie does get a little bit redundant, and it does happen quite one other time, or, it is getting a little redundant, where she once again talks about how their powers, but this time it's more from a side of envy. So there is a little bit of difference in this song, but I will say again that there is a little bit of that. The songs are very, at least those two are very, the first one and this one are very similar, and it's, talking about the powers, obviously. But she sees, when she's left alone, that the house begins to crack. So, she tries to call it out to everyone, particularly the grandma, and they don't see it, whatever she's referring to. Everything appears fine. So the grandma doesn't believe her, and everyone else is like, She tries to also convince her mom, who also has her doubts about what's going on with all this cracking and whatnot. Then her mother mentions her brother, I believe, which sends down bad vibes. Now, I will say the whole thing with the brother does leave a pretty interesting flip for Disney. Now, I would say since Frozen is the first I noticed it, is the whole surprise villain thing that they tried to do in Frozen, and, at first it had, that whole thing, and then people started, dishing out against it and criticizing it in different ways from aspects of the villain still isn't that interesting, or things of that nature, and all that other stuff. But here they do a flip where it seems like the route that they're going down is that the brother is apparently evil. At least that's what I assumed what was happening when I first heard that. So good on Disney for pulling the rug under me, and the writers for doing that. But as she's sneaking about, she overhears her grandmother talking about how the magic is indeed fading. So there is something indeed going on. So, she learns that one of her other siblings, named Lisa, knows something's going down. Lisa, her power is being incredibly strong. And indeed, when Lisa is confronted about this, she sings about how strong she is. So this is the third song dealing with, guess what? Someone's powers. Now, this is someone's individual power, and it goes more in depth and a little bit more into her character and how she feels like the weight of the family is on her shoulders in a figurative sense, while literally being the bodybuilder and strong, literal strong woman. Um, so, um, yep, that's how that goes. Uh, so, Mary, the lead, sneaks further into the house, into the forbidden part where the brother was said to be had. And she goes through an area that doesn't feel like it's connected to the house in any semblance of way, where it's like this sandy area. It looks like something out of Tomb Raider or something. And she enters this dark room where she sees these green shards that are scattered. She puts them together, and she sees herself in this little piece of these shards being put together. So she's kind of off-put by that, and the house being shattered as well. Let's see. So, as she does that, when she makes her way back, they talk more, or she's trying to get her family to talk about the brother. Her brother's name is Bruno, and that is when they specifically sing about how, again, indicating that he's, once again, doubling down on, he feels like he's meant to be the villain of this movie. They sing about how bad it is to be around him and how they shouldn't even be talking about it, but they're still, like, it's all like hush hush, but still singing about it. Bringing about this bad luck. So this is, again, the second time they are doubling down on this indication that Bruno is someone not to be messed with. So she took the pieces of the shards with her, and, so she's trying to talk to her dad about what's going on and what she did. And the house itself is starting to, once again, fall out of line. And eventually the grandma finds out. While all that's going on, she follows some rats around, and she's with this shattered pieces, and she finds Bruno, and starts to just talk with him. And he talks about how, how the whole fortune thing is like, and he talks about how fate isn't decided, how it could play one way or the other. So, as it would turn out, they, again, flip it where Bruno isn't a villain, more so that he's naturally misunderstood, as since he does see the future, he tends to get a bad rap because he tends to say things that could indicate like a bad thing is going to happen. Not that he himself is bad. Now, what makes that interesting is that Disney has been trying so hard to, change all of these very famous villains in the past and and reforming them, giving them these new tragic backstories, or as tragic as they can conceivably try to attempt to make them, aka like Cruella or Maleficent. Those two are the two leading examples currently. Here, instead, they just make a new character, and they just say, hey, this guy is misunderstood. Which is something I think it's so much better, like, naturally. Like, you're not taking an existing character and changing it, finally. It feels like Disney finally fucking listened and said, you know what? We're actually just gonna make a new character, make him the misunderstood villain, and then, do that whole bit and flip it on its head. It definitely feels refreshing when it's not someone that's pre-existing, and, that pre-existing character has their own badassery that they lose in, you know, because of their remakes or reimaginings or whatever you want to call them. Point being, it's refreshing to see this be the alternative to what Disney has been doing with remakes and the like. So, Bruno does his magic again. Um, excuse me. And he essentially tells her, the lead character, that she has to apologize or hug it out with her sister, since her sister, is this flower girl whose name I can't remember for the life of me. Essentially, her whole thing is that she's the playoff of the perfect, a character that has no flaws. And the movie does this too on purpose, and apparently I'll get to that in just a little bit more. Oh, I wrote it. Actually, I did write. Her name is Issa. Sorry. Anyway. So, Mary talks to her, Issa, and she kind of, again, her grudge, her envy, which is, I would say, her consistent flaw. So, wow, a Disney female lead with an actual flaw. Golf clap for Disney for actually having a Disney character with a flaw. It feels like, again, like this stuff should be the default, and it's so bizarre that I have to applaud that now because it feels so rare. So yeah, her flaw of envy is made evident by the second song, as I mentioned, and here it is coming up again, where she could have just simply admitted and said the truth about, here's what we need to do. She lets that envy of her sister take hold of her, and she's like, nope, I'm not doing it that way. But eventually, they do sing about, just as they're about to leave each other. And the song, this particular song, of course, as unpredictable as this is, it goes over her powers. But there is a little bit extra about how their relationship kind of goes through this roller coaster from this whole idea of them being split, and then when she makes her first mistake, this Issa, this character who was flawless by all Disney standards, finally was able to make something ugly, and that actually was something that fascinated her. And when they discover this, they are able to, sing together, and through the song, they're able to make through their differences. So, I would say out of all the songs, I feel like that one has the most going on in it, outside of the whole, this is their power, and this is what it does. And again, to be fair to the Lisa song, it also, again, goes into a bit of their character, so there are some things with the songs, at least the latter ones, that are a little bit stronger than the opening songs. Doing the whole exposition about what their powers are. I'm not saying that they're terrible songs, I'm just saying I wouldn't say they're great either, they're just fine. Anyway, so they hug during the song, and after the fact, the grandma sees all of this nonsense, and, she's been kind of out of the loop, so she's, blaming her and blaming her and blaming her for everything, and the house begins to, literally break apart, so there's a figurative it breaking apart as well, as the whole theme of the movie. Those two are kind of interconnected in this sense. And the others are starting to lose their powers because the powers appear to be attached to the house itself. So, while the house is still kind of falling apart-ish, it's also trying to simultaneously protect our lead character, Mary, who's like dashing and falling and doing all this stuff, and eventually runs off, kind of distraught about all that. So eventually the grandma finds her feeling kind of bad that, um, you know, that this whole situation had to go down the way it did. As she talks to her about how when she was young, how she fell in love. And while this is happening, this caught me off guard because it's definitely the most unique song in the entire movie. I don't know what the lyrics mean, but because the entire song is in Spanish. It's the first song that's actually fully in Spanish, so that legitimately caught me off guard. I was like, huh, that's pretty cool. Definitely, and again, I'm assuming it has something to do with the things in the background, which is her flashback and, the grandma talking about how tough it was and how she's trying to keep everything just level-headed. But that led to her kind of being too stiff. And the main character obviously does explain that. To give her a chance. They hug it out. She hugs it out with Bruno. And this is where everyone sings together. All of the family members, all the other minor characters within the family as well. There's like one that can like shift into other parts of the family. There's like this quiet girl that can like hear everything. Those are two I can remember off the top of my head. Anyways, they all decide to rebuild the house. They give Mary the last part of the house, which is the doorknob, and then they proceed to take a family photo, and that is the end of Enchanto. Now, I will say the other thing that I will promptly give a golf clap to this movie for is that they didn't give her powers at the end of the movie. That could have been such an easy thing for them to do, and it would have been, and I think it would have definitely hurt the whole point of her being the way she is in this movie, to give her powers by the end, when the whole point of it is that she's not meant to have powers in that regard, but she's still a part of the family, and that the conflict doesn't come from some sort of super villain or something. It just comes from the family, eternal struggles that are happening within this household, which is why the household thing is both literal and figurative at the same time. And the people of the town also provide some extra assistance because the whole family helps out the town with their powers and stuff throughout the movie. And that was Enchanto. On an objective scale, I would say this movie, again, it's fine. I would say a solid 7 out of 10. Probably, maybe, the most I would push is a 6 out of 10. Just because the repetition does get a little bit unnecessary. But it's not too bad in that regard, I suppose. Each song, as I did mention, does have that slight thing where it's like still telling us something about a character, so there is that. Like I said, I wouldn't say it's... I would say... comparatively, I do still enjoy Coco more, both subjectively and objectively. I think Coco is a superior movie, but I think this movie's fine. Totally inoffensive. Again, just rather always glad to see something, once again, original come out of Disney, considering. And with that being said, that is my review of Enchanto. And if you ended up enjoying it, then please feel free to like, comment, and subscribe. Also make sure to check out those links in the description. The first will head you over to my Discord, the second to my Patreon, and the third to my PayPal. Any donations or request can go through either one of those now. And with that being said, until next everyone, bye-bye.